So not only workshopping like the individual narrative of the story of the case study, but also talking about making sure that that narrative fits into the broader scope of the website and
Yeah,
kind of like,
exactly. You said that a lot more succinctly than I did. I think people have to define and discover their own process that works for them to some degree. But I do think it's a really good idea to have an idea of where you're going to go. Like that's if you take one thing away from this, know where you're going, figure that out first, and then work towards that goal. It's kind of like working with another human in a way. It's like you can't expect somebody to read your mind and come up with the perfect thing. You kind of have to break it down.
welcome to another episode of the Code and Cognition podcast. I'm your host, Josh. And today we have Olio's Director of Delivery, Monica, back again to discuss with us a little of their experience and some of the challenges and real benefits of utilizing AI to optimize case studies and improve the sort of content development for the website. Monica, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been fun. So looking forward to talking about it.
I'd love for you to dive into utilizing AI to help automate and accelerate the case study making process.
Oh, yeah, sure. The case study process. Right. Yeah. So I was tasked with writing some fairly complex case studies, one for Bumped Up, Listen, another one for Aptio. And these are pretty heavy duty technical projects. There's a business component and a technical component. And yeah, I wanted a partner to do it with as opposed to just me, and wanted to experiment with how AI could help speed that process up. We did the first case study was with Bumped Up, and there was minimal use of AI and a different process around it. But then I think I really nailed it down with the Listen case study that I just recently did, as well as another one that I'm currently working on.
I'd love to hear about like what was the first process, and then how did that change from the to the second case study?
Yeah, well, the first process was actually a team. So it was me and Dustin is kind of heading up Olio's practices, methods and practices around using AI to accelerate code development. And so we did a rewrite for Bumped Up, and we did that rewrite using Claude Code, I think. Yeah, it was Claude Code to do that. And so Dustin was the subject matter for that, and he actually was helping me write it. And I know he used AI somewhat. I can't remember if it was ChatGPT or Claude, but I did a lot of my work just manually. I was the project manager for that project, so I kind of knew the business aspect of it and the value to the client. And Dustin kind of had the technology and was working with the team to start, to implement those processes. And so the two of us were working on it, but for my parts of it, I didn't use AI at all. I was doing things by hand and from my knowledge, and I was in essence like the business subject matter expert.
So you were spending a lot of time articulating like the current state of the business, the problem that they're running into, and then articulating the value of the solution in
Right,
the case.
yeah, and it took a long time, right? And it was collaborative in the sense that I was working with Dustin and Dustin was working with AI, and I eventually started using AI a little bit myself, but it was probably took about a month to finish up that case study. Not full-time work, but part-time work, and it was several iterations. And I spent hours on it. I don't know, like 20 hours or something like that. And it turned out to be a really good case study. But then when I did the Listen one, I probably only spent 4 or 5 hours on it. So got about a 4x improvement. So that was great because we'd like
Like,
to do more case studies.
wow, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did you reduce it down to only 4 hours? How did you get this 4x optimization?
Well, I kind of like it was a requirement because, well, that's not totally true. I did know the topic of Listen, but Listen involved an AI, generative AI features, and RN was the subject matter expert on that because he was the one that trained and built the workbench and stuff and trained the prompts to give the right outcomes and things like that. So I used AI to, I guess, strategize with it a little bit. Like I had in my mind the story I wanted to tell, and I think that was really important. to kind of have the end result. Like, what is the theme of this? What do we want the reader of this case study to take away? If they can only take away one thing, what is that thing? Because you start talking about these case studies and there's like 20 things you could talk about, but what is like the one thing we want people to take away? Or, maybe there's three or four actually, if I think about it honestly, but having an idea of where you're going. And so I had an idea in my head, but then I also sort of collaborated or brainstormed a little bit with Claude about that. So in parallel with that, I'm reworking the website. So I'm creating all the content for a new website, which is actually like three websites in one, because we're realizing we have three sort of distinct types of services that we're offering. So I had to kind of like look at that and look at the gaps and where we needed the case study to fit. Is it in the building software, the scaling software, or the evaluate portion of the website? And what are the stories that we want to tell there? And how do we want to sort of like angle this one to give me like a thing that could be used in more than one place? Potentially, it's like just to create a case study is interesting, but to create a case study in an area where we want to get traction and tell a story was a thought process that I used Claude with a little bit as well.
So not only workshopping like the individual narrative of the story of the case study, but also talking about making sure that that narrative fits into the broader scope of the website and
Yeah,
kind of like
exactly. You said that a lot more succinctly than I did. Yeah, and then the other thing I had it do because I wanted to use Aaron's expertise and have him be a subject matter expert, but he's very limited on time. So once I had kind of the general theme and story that I wanted to create, I wanted to interview Aaron. The first round that I did was I just had him talk about the project and I recorded it and then I transcribed that recording and then fed that to Claude and had it basically create an outline for me that fit the theme, reviewed that outline, then sort of like tweaked some of it, and then had it just write the post essentially. And it wrote a post and it was a little bit long and rambly and repeating itself. And so then I worked with it to try kind of trim it down and pointed to it, places where I thought it could be better. And then had it suggest changes that it would make based on my feedback, do a rewrite. And then I did another review session with Aaron where I actually didn't give him the post to read, but I got him on Zoom and we recorded it and I got his feedback live in real time.
and that was you two going through the post that you had written or something on something different.
We went through the post that I had written. So interviewed the subject matter expert, kind of used a collaborative process with AI to create like a finished product that was of the number of words that I wanted, fit the outline, fit the right theme. And then I went back to the subject matter expert and said, okay, let's look at this together. Let's read this together. And that was a little bit of a happy accident because my normal process would be just to send somebody something to read. But Aaron knows himself and he said, I think I can read this if you like get on Zoom with me and sort of like walk me through it.
Fantastic.
And he reacted to it live and in real time. And I got his reactions like raw, I guess, which turned out to be really valuable. And again, recorded that transcript and then went through the process again. Asked Claude to take the feedback and pull out the themes from the feedback. And then we collaborated a little bit on which of those themes were like prioritizing those themes of feedback, applying those, but not having it go and just change the text. I basically said, here's the copy. Now, yeah, I care about theme A, B, and C. Now you can suggest changes that you see in the copy based on those themes, but don't actually change the copy, but insert, where you would change it and why.
So it seems like it is a pretty refined process and contextual to your experience with Claude as sort of like a buddy or a co-assistant. What sort of experiences did you have before with, I don't know, Claude or your LLMs writing content that helped influence the way that you're, you know, interfacing with it this way? Because
Mhm.
I've done quite a bit of this work as well in different domains, and I can recognize certain elements of like, yeah, no, I've learned not to just tell it, rewrite it using these themes, and it may just rewrite it in a way where it's completely off kilter, then you've lost your 4 hours of working with it or however, and you have to go back. But I'm interested to know what your experience has been. How did you get to this point?
I think there was some learnings along the way. One of the things that I did fairly recently in my efforts to redo the website and put more content on the website was I took all of our Clutch reviews out of Clutch. So I kind of like we downloaded them, and you can't just take those reviews and like put them on your website, nor would I think you want to. But there was a lot of gold in there, and so I put like 20 different files, which were these downloads of these web reviews that clients of ours had given. And I created a project in Claude so you can upload all these files. And I basically said, go tell me what our customers think is awesome about us, right? And it was able to, that was a lot of data because each review is like 3 pages of text. And I had 20 of them, and it went out and pulled themes that said, one of the things that's amazing about that your customers think is amazing is your flexibility, for example. And here's some quotes that customers gave you that support this sort of key value of flexibility. And it just did that like in 2 seconds. I mean, maybe it was a minute and a half, I don't know, but it was so fast compared to me reading through all of those things and gathering that data that it just sort of gave me an appreciation of how fast it can be at accessing information. And then the other thing that was an interesting learning for me was another case study that I was working on. I wanted to tell a theme of, hey, Olio knows how to address like technical debt. So we're working in kind of the mergers and acquisitions space, and we sort of stumbled into that because some of our clients have been acquired, and we've fixed some things that were the result of mergers and acquisitions that were could be related to technical debt. And I kind of wanted to ask AI, well, find the technical debt like things, but also tell me what are the top 10 problems with technical debt in the mergers and acquisitions space. And I did those in separate AIs, and so it wasn't like just talking to itself,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Separate AIs and separate projects or separate chats, and so that it could I could sort of have some independent thinking on that. And that was really valuable. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
No, no, you definitely are. I think you're getting at it. In the past, when you've kind of mixed those questions within the same chat, do you find that I don't know, at once, what do you see happens instead?
I haven't done a lot of work with AI before this, but for personal projects, what I would notice, it would start to tell me what it thought I wanted to hear. Like, you're thinking about this is spot on, and here's the reality, but it's just feeding back to me what I gave it, as opposed to going out and doing independent research.
Then that's a very important point to hedge against, or at least to architect against. In many ways, there's like a line between. I think there's different functionality, like using the AI to speed up like a manual cognitive process, like going through all of the different reviews and pulling out similarities and then synthesizing them. Like that's great. But then there's, I think, something that's functionally different, which is also tell me the 10 different high ranking problems in mergers and acquisitions. Like that is like a different range of you know cognitive use, one would say. So
Right.
mixing those two, I could imagine, kind of maybe mixes up the thinking. It begins to try to think, oh, I have to think in a way that does both simultaneously, when really you don't really care, you just want the best information.
Yeah, and I found it was really great to get me cites, right? Citings for these things. So why do you think this is the top 3 things for technical debt? And it was able to go out and find web links of like, McKinsey studies or other Harvard Business Review studies and things like that, and point me to them so I could validate and have actual valid credibility in the writing. And that was cool because we validated that the work that we have done in Olio is actually meeting the mark, and we hit most, if not all, of those technical debt, problems in mergers and acquisitions. So that was cool. The other thing that I did as well is I gave in the Claude projects, you can give it instructions. And so putting instructions in there like be critical, don't just give me what you think I want to hear, that kind of stuff. I learned to do that from someone else. I didn't really experience not doing that on this project, but once I started looking into it, that was some advice, and I think that was helpful to do.
it definitely changes the game, I would say, when you're asking it to cite sources and then you're going and checking the sources and seeing that they're correct. And that's like some major value add to find out is what you were saying that you were able to learn that the kinds of projects that were successful that Olio was doing kind of match these larger trends. Is that was one of the insights you were
Mhm.
able to pull out from this process?
Yes.
See that's amazing because so much we may not know, or when a business does something or has an offering or has a client and it's successful, a major question is like, was it a fluke? Did we just get lucky? There's such a confluence of factors that are hyper contextual to the problem, to the individual having the problem, and then to the larger market forces. So to be able to find out that, oh wow, we're actually tapping into a major market need that's backed up by data, and you don't have to run your own McKinsey level study. I don't even want to think about how much time and effort those things cost. You don't even have to do that, but that's
For
awesome.
sure, as a small company, we can't do that. And it can all actually it can open up just not only ways to market things, but ways to craft service offerings to the market.
More intelligently or with more sophistication of how one thinks about the offers that they give as a business.
Mhm.
I don't know how people are also thinking of leveraging AI to do the research within the context of their own service offerings and successful case studies and being able to see how the language of their customers map to like real world data and real world trends. That's quite
Mhm.
new.
Yeah, it's been really fun to work with it.
Now, what else in this process has like particularly surprised you? Has it sort of met your expectations or gone the way that you planned, or is there something that really jumped out as like, oh wow, this is really unexpected, or this is really changing the way I'm going to be
Mhm.
interfacing with AI for this kind of work?
Well, it's totally changed the way that I write because I am a writer personally as well, and I write things for my own self and have a little bit of an audience on the side. And usually the way I write is I discover what I want to write about just by writing. Like I'll just open the computer, I'll have a random thought and I'll just want to write. I would call it more like creative writing, I guess. But I did business writing before as well for another startup that I had. And that's kind of always how it worked was you just because you're working by yourself and you just start writing and you kind of discover what you want to write about and the outline and the story arc emerges as you write. That was my process. I know not everybody does it that way, but that was what I was used to. And this totally flipped that around where I had to understand where I was going before I started because I was doing like almost like a product requirements document if you were thinking about this from a software perspective in advance to starting to write. It was like, where are we going? What's the outline? What are the themes? Okay, now we're ready to write. And that's not how I did it before. So it's not maybe as emotionally satisfying for me, but that's not what this is about. Because I really enjoy that process of like discovering stuff as I write personally, but it's not efficient or helpful
Definitely.
for our business context, I think. And then the other thing that is I guess it still remains a little bit of a mystery or a surprise is how Claude, I think you might notice it in my language that I can talk a lot and kind of like I'm not 100% like A, B, C. I'm not super linear in my thinking. And I don't know if it's picked up on that and it gets that way a little bit too. I mean, sometimes if I say clarify this, if you tell it clarify this, it does a great job. But also, I've noticed it starts to repeat and rephrase and some of that, and just generally makes things too long. And I don't know if it's learning that from me or if that's just how it is.
There's a little bit of some ambiguity there between is it naturally learning your own like speech patterns or writing patterns, or is this like the limitation of the LLM itself of not
Mhm.
getting enough to go in a certain directions and it's starting to just sort of churn out. So
Right.
that's a valuable point. But it seems like you're saying that you're able to kick it back in the right direction, able to tell it to clarify, give it a bit more guardrails and and how to give out its output.
And I also might say too that like I have a certain conversational style to my writing. And that may or may not be the style that like the person who executed on the client project. And if they're my subject matter expert and then they're reviewing the work, they might go, oh, that sounds a little too conversational or weird. It's more of a guts feel. And so I haven't tried this, but maybe giving Claude an example of their writing to reflect could be something to try next.
I'd imagine too that as you continue to build up this content, you build up the case studies, and you're able to get the feedback and the results that you want. You can then just like feed that back into the engine, help like double down. It's like yes, more like this. This is the pattern in this way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that work that I did with the reviews, I've reused that work several times as well. I mean, there's a lot of reuse available here because you can build documents and then you can give it to another project and say, look at this document and make me some kind of another, like, here's a page on mergers and acquisitions work, for example.
And I think wanting to re-highlight from as I've heard in this conversation, I think to summarize the process is that one thing that you've learned is like planning and creating a narrative of what you're wanting the end result to be, and then workshopping that with the LLM, and then doing a round of like feedback, whether it's just yourself or with the subject matter expert if you're utilizing that. And then once you do that, there's like a final round or another tertiary round of refinement. And
Yeah,
so
like maybe don't be so like I noticed on one of the case studies, it was kind of like, or maybe it was a web page, I can't remember, but it just sounded a little bit too casual. Like, oh, it's not about cost cutting, it's about this and this and this. And I was like, that's a little too, I don't know, not something you want on a formal website, a more
yeah.
formal professional website.
Hmm, hmm.
So I would put that in the category of that further refinement. But yeah, you've got the process.
Excellent.
Sure.
Well, then I think what is it you've truly like designed or implemented what they call like the human in the loop evaluation process for your LLM. You're guiding the outputs, checking the outputs, and then using that to further perpetuate the desired result based off of the use case and the context. So this is like the gold star of LLM operationalization in a business. So really cool to be witnessing.
It's the process that's working for me right now.
Mhm.
One thing I have learned is in talking to some other people that use AI for writing, they use it in different ways. And I can't really speak in detail about that, but I think people have to define and discover their own process that works for them to some degree. But I do think it's a really good idea to have an idea of where you're going to go. Like that's if you take one thing away from this, know where you're going, figure that out first, and then work towards that goal. It's kind of like working with another human in a way. It's like you can't expect somebody to read your mind and come up with the perfect thing. You kind of have to break it down.
Completely. That's really good advice. That's really good advice because there's no one way that people write or people write for them, and so needing to experience with it. I was reading a perspective on someone I follow, and they're doing a lot of like AI assisted development, content writing, marketing, and they were talking about how what was it? One of their biggest regrets of the past year was kind of having like jumping LLM tools too much or jumping processes too much, and then having to relearn how to talk to ChatGPT and use it, or having to talk to Claude, or having to talk to whatever kind of tool that they're using. And I think I can, after hearing you talk about what you've gone through to develop this process and to have a process that works so well, I can really see how that could. You wouldn't be able to get there if every week you were changing to a different tool or trying to reinvent the wheel of it. You really had to dedicate considerable amount of time to utilizing your tool in order to know how to communicate with it.
Yes and no. I mean, yes,
Hmm.
I've developed it and it's been iterative and learning, but it's also saved me time along the way. Like, it's been a really pretty effective, efficient process, I guess. Just trying stuff. Because what's the worst that can happen? It gives you a bunch of gobbledygook and then you throw it away and start again. And it literally takes 90 seconds or less.
And you've been saying you've been using. Have you used any other? I suppose the follow up question I have there is: have you tried to replicate this process in like with other models before?
No, I think it could work in ChatGPT. I've used ChatGPT a little, but for the most part, I started using Claude because somebody I knew was using it, and he told me about the instructions thing to put in. And he actually gave me a file to just copy and paste into the instructions, and I tried that. And in order to do those instructions, you have to create a project, not just a chat. And I imagine ChatGPT has something similar. I don't know. But whenever I've used ChatGPT, it's just been with chats. Yeah, I'm not here to sell Claude or anything, but it's something that I picked and it kind of works. I have not tried Gemini.
Okay.
A lot of people swear by using Gemini for writing and research.
Well then, that's something for someone to test out, for someone to
Something
check.
for someone to test out. I guess I could try the next one using Gemini or ChatGPT if you want me to, Josh.
Oh, sure. And then we can interview you and see what is was the process good enough to sort of salvage any relative difference in LLM, or is like, whoa, one of these foundation models is not performing enough to get me an output. That would be interesting to see.
Any other questions?
But specifically, if there's any advice you'd have for someone who is wanting to like start using either Claude or ChatGPT to assist them with, I don't know, writing, business writing, or even their creative writing, like is there a suggestion you would make for their process? How should they be thinking about the process? Is it having a clear idea of where you're wanting to go? Is that it, or is there something else you'd also recommend?
Well, I think if you don't know clearly where you want to go, you can get to that answer first. But yeah, I think the first checkbox is know where you want to go. And if you just have some rough ideas about where you might want to go, have it do some research, talk to it. You can talk to it just like a human. Hey, maybe my objective is to get more clients, for example. And oh, the other thing, I didn't talk about this before, but you can have it interview you. And I did use that at one point. So you can say, hey, I want to get more clients. Ask me some questions to help you understand where I am now and where we need to go from here. And it will ask you questions. And I did that as well with some of the case studies. I said, what other questions do you have that I'm not answering? And that would add credibility to this post, that kind of thing. And it would ask me questions, and I didn't know the answers to all of them. So I had to go back to my subject matter expert and ask those questions and have them answer and then come back. So there's some of that. But I love that idea that it can just ask you things.
Absolutely. And then you know that whatever answer you're providing, you're giving it, 100% verifiable data or information that you want it to know. It's coming right from your mouth. So I do
Yeah.
like that a lot.
Yeah, and you can just really brainstorm it. You can say, ask me questions that you think, and then that's gonna naturally, just as if you're in conversation with a human, lead you to have other thoughts, and you can have a conversation, and then eventually you'll land on, okay, where do I want this particular piece of content to go? What's the objective of this particular piece of content? How does that fit into my strategy or my objective, just to do something really high level and vague, like get more clients? So you can start as with whatever you know and have it help you refine your thinking.
Wow. I think that's like an excellent suggestion. I think one of the best I've heard
I
so
know.
far.
How come I didn't think about that before? You're such a good interviewer. Yeah.
It takes two individuals coming together to to create a novel, interesting output.
Yeah,
And when we don't have people, we can now use LLMs and have them interview us and kind of simulate that process, which is quite cool.
we can. That is true. All right.
Well, thank you so much, Monica, for taking some time during the holiday season to sit down and let me interview you and ask you some questions.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. And
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yes, have a good holiday. Take care. Until next time.